Okay, so
join me.
all right, yeah,
have a party.
yeah, absolutely. Please do. Actually, the more we have, the better, because then I don't have to repeat myself.
I'll move my bag.
And I'm gonna be stealing this because it's one of the only ones, and everyone's like, "What? Okay. What are you asking me to picture?" Okay, so, all right, everyone. Okay, so here we have the medial aspect of the brainstem and the diencephalon, right? This would be the front of the brain. This is the back of the brain. Everyone's clear on that. Okay, so there is a sulcus right in here. You see, it's been covered in pen 100 times. And so everyone sees that sulcus right here. Right. This would be the hypothalamic sulcus.
Could you show me real quick?
This right here is the hypothalamic sulcus.
Thank you.
Okay? Right? Everyone sees that. Okay? Hypothalamic sulcus. And I will be coming around also, so if you don't see it this time, you can see it another time. Okay, so above the hypothalamic sulcus is the thalamus, and below the hypothalamic sulcus is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is this entire triangular pink area, okay? Entire triangular pink area under the hypothalamic sulcus, okay? It makes up the wall of the third ventricle. This is important because when I show you frontal sections, you're going to go, oh my god, how am I going to flip this in 3D? Just remember that the wall of the third ventricle is the hypothalamus. And I'll show you the slices in a minute. Okay? So, right in front, you have this stuff hanging off. And this right here. Okay? This right here. So a lot of people have no idea what that is, or they call it all sorts of things. This would be the optic chiasm, okay? It's right out front, and this is where the optic nerves come in, and the chiasm is where they cross over, and they go down, and it becomes the optic tract afterwards, okay? So this is the optic chiasm. Right behind the optic chiasm, you see this white little thing hanging off, and it's connected to the big ball, okay? Everyone? No, it's broken off on just about every single model except for this one. The little stalk that hangs off is called the infundibulum. Okay? The infundibulum is just a fiber tract that connects the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland. So there it is. You don't have it. I'm really sorry. I mean, you personally do, just not the model. Okay? Okay. And then you have the pituitary, this little ball at the end. And what you need to know about the pituitary from the exercise is the posterior portion is called the neurohypophysis. I don't know why. I'm not quite sure exactly why it's all that important versus the front of it. But
What is it called?
Neurohypophysis, and it's on page 15. Okay? Study tip, highlight all the bold words, plus any functions that go with it, and then when you color in on your other manual, color it the same color so it all matches. I swear it's really good, especially when you go back to study, because then you don't have to read this wall of text. That's just a pro tip. Okay, so off of the infundibulum, at the base of the brain, there's a surrounding area that's donut shaped. Okay, it doesn't ensheath the infundibulum. It's just at the base. Okay, at the base. Okay, so let me find a picture because I think it's a little bit easier on a picture than me just pointing random stuff. Okay, so here you go. This is the front of the brainstem in your manuals. Okay, so the infundibulum would be coming right off the middle right there. It's poking out of the paper, and there's this donut-shaped region right around it. That's the tuber cinereum. Okay. I don't know what it does. It's just the surface area surrounding the infundibulum on the bottom of the brain. Okay? So, moving back, you have this little ball that hangs off of the bottom of the hypothalamus. That would be the mammillary body. Okay? And I think it is part of the hypothalamus, but that's the mammillary body. Okay? And on the big brain model, the mammillary body is green. Okay? It's the green ball underneath there. Green ball. Okay? All right. So that's the mammillary body. Okay. Moving on, and it's easier to see on the big brain model. Where's the other half?
There's pieces of it everywhere.
Aha. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. So now we're looking at the back of the brainstem of the big brain model, right? Okay. And you can see a bunch of bumps here, okay? The bottom two bumps are the inferior colliculus, and that's part of the auditory relay station. And then the top ones are the superior colliculus. These are really important for ocular motility, okay? These guys are connected to the LGN and the MGN. They see excentric tracts that way. So this big lump right here, that's the back of the thalamus, right? Everyone can agree. And so, really hard to see on here, but much more clear on our pictures, is that if you follow down the tracks that come off of these, you will find a little bump underneath the thalamus. And so the inferior colliculus goes to the MGN, and the superior colliculus goes to the LGN. And it's much easier and clearer to see on here. Okay? So if you see the inferior colliculus, you follow it, there's another bump underneath, that's the MGN. The superior colliculus, you follow it, that bump is the LGN, okay? Okay. Now, I think that's in the next exercise. What's important for this exercise is that there's a bump above the superior colliculi, right in the middle, okay? This would be the pineal body, okay? And so we had to find the pineal body last time because it's right next to the habenular commissure and the posterior commissure. Does that ring a bell? Yes? Okay. Hopefully. Okay, so what you need to know about the pineal body for this exercise is that that part of the pineal body is the epithalamus. Okay, so we have a bunch of thalamuses that we need to know about. There's the thalamus, the hypothalamus, which we found, right? It's this pink triangular portion. There's the subthalamus, which I'll show you on a slide, and then the epithalamus, which is the non-neural portion of the pineal body. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, you've got neurons, and then you have a set of different cells, probably doing an endocrine function, okay? So the epithalamus is just the non-neural part of the pineal body, okay? And so the pineal body then has a function. Does anyone know what it does?
Regulates sleep and circadian.
Right. So it's circadian rhythms and sleep, and it releases melatonin. And melatonin is what makes you go to sleep. So, awesome. Then we have the ventricles, and then I can show you guys slides. So, here we have some of the central ventricles, and then you have the lateral ventricle, right? And it's lateral. That's why it's called the lateral ventricle. So just starting with this ventricle right here in the middle, that would be the third ventricle.
And it's the hypothalamus that's behind the front part. Yeah, where your fingers.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it makes up the wall of the third ventricle.
Okay.
Or it's along the wall of the third ventricle. Yep.
So behind it would be.
Yeah, behind it and on this side too. If I
In front and below would be the hypothalamus, and then above
And then back
a little bit
here-
behind the thalamus.
Right. And so there's a hole right here, and that's for, do you remember what this little belly button thing is?
Thalamic adhesion.
This is for the thalamic adhesion, right?
Is that thing?
So, okay, and then you have the connector, and that would be you just said it.
Oh, the aqueduct.
Yeah, this is the cerebral aqueduct. It's the neck between the third thalamus, oh my god, the third ventricle, and the fourth ventricle. Okay, so third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle, right? Fourth ventricle is in the brain stem. It's not exposed like this. There's a cerebellum that sits right on top of it, okay? But if you look at it from behind,
Is it that monster-looking picture he's showing us in class where you're looking like
yes,
up the back of the
right?
brain?
So the monster is the thalamus. You've got the colliculi that kind of look like it's got lots of eyes or whatever, and then it's got this open weird mouth thing. Okay, so that would be the fourth ventricle, and normally it's not exposed. Normally you have the cerebellum sitting right on it. Okay, all right. So what's important about the fourth ventricle is that when you take off the cerebellum, it makes like a diamond, okay? And so the diamond's got two horizontal points, okay? And they go laterally, right? And they make a recess, and a recess is just like a dip or a ditch or a cave or something. So these are called the lateral recess, okay? They're the corners right here. That's the lateral recess of the fourth ventricle. And I think that covers the ventricles except for the lateral ventricle, right? So everyone knows this one. And so you picture your brain all around it, and you've got your frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and then down here the temporal lobe, right? Okay? So this is divided into horns, And so you have the anterior horn, makes sense, it's the most anterior portion of it. Then you have the body. Then in the back, you have the posterior horn. This sticks into the occipital lobe. And then this is the inferior horn, which goes into the temporal lobe. Okay? In the temporal lobe. That's important. Okay, so that covers all the stuff we can see on the models. So now, I'm going to show you some brain slices. And hopefully you will retain all of this information. Okay, so horizontal section, right? I'm going to move back so you can see. This is the front, this is the back, right? Everyone understands why and can identify that, okay? And so this section is cut in terms of ventricles like this, okay? Which means that everything above the section can't be seen, and everything hanging below the section can't be seen. So don't make the mistake of calling stuff like the inferior horn, because clearly not seeable. Okay? So, if that's true, what would this hole be? Right? This is the lateral ventricle. What part?
Anterior horn.
No. Right? So we cut it like this. So the body is floating on above. Right? This is the anterior horn. Okay? So if that's the anterior horn, what was this back part? Right. That's the posterior horn, not the inferior horn, like a lot of people like to call it. Okay? Alright, so then we have the basal ganglia from last week that we're not going to go over. But what we see right here is the thalamic nuclei. Okay, do you have a lot of glare?
Yeah.
How do you want me to tilt it?
That's good.
Right here?
Yeah.
Can everyone see it down here? You can. Can you see it now? Sweet. Okay. So there are 4 major nuclear groups that we need to know about, okay? In the front, not very clear on here, but in the front is the anterior. Okay, so you have the anterior thalamic nuclei. Really easy, they're anterior. Okay, in the middle we have 2 different groups. We have a darker group and a lighter group on the outside. The darker group is called the dorsomedial nuclei. Okay, it's clear to see that they're medial. It's not really clear to see why they're dorsal in this cut.
Do you have to name them both, or could you just say dorsal or medial?
No, it's the dorsal medial nuclei. Okay, and when we look at the frontal section, you'll see that they are slightly dorsal. And that's why they have that entire name, okay? The outer ones are the ventrolateral ones, okay? In the back, you have posterior nuclei, and this one in particular is a huge group of nuclei, and it's called the pulvinar, okay? Other posterior nuclei include the LGN and the MGN, okay? And those are the only 3 things you need to know about the posterior nuclei. So you have the pulvinar, the dorsomedial nuclei, the ventrolateral, and the anterior nuclei. Okay?
And these are parts of both the thalamus and the hypothalamus?
No, this is only the thalamus.
Only thalamus.
You can't see the hypothalamus on here.
Okay.
Because it's underneath.
Okay.
Okay? Alright, so that's the horizontal section. Now we're going to look at some frontal sections. Okay? Top, bottom, right? Everyone's oriented. We see the basal ganglia from last week. Great. So we have the 3rd ventricle, right? And you see the brown stuff that's lining the walls. So what would that be?
Hypothalamus.
Right, this is the hypothalamus on a frontal section, right? Brown stuff is nuclei, white stuff is fiber tracts. So the brown stuff lining the walls of the 3rd ventricle is the hypothalamus.
Now, is this the front or the anterior portion? I mean, those are going to be the amygdaloid glands, aren't they?
Right.
So this
right.
is going to be the more
so,
towards your face.
Right.
Okay.
So this is, and we don't have any brain stem, so it's probably a cut like this.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So you have the hypothalamus, and then if it were on here, an infundibulum would hang down right from the bottom, right underneath the hypothalamus. It would be hanging down. That is really easy to rip off, though, because the pituitary gland is seated in like its own little skull capsule. It's so important that it has like its own little enclosure, and so when you take a brain out, it tends to tear off. There's almost no way to get at it. So that's why sections are really difficult to have an infundibulum.
With the hypothalamus, you said it's only this thin little strip of brown
Yeah.
on both sides of the third ventricle?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All this brown stuff and a little bit underneath there too.
Okay.
So this
it's definitely not as big as a thalamus by any means.
No, it's
Okay.
not. But it is long. I mean,
Okay.
If
Well,
you
yeah, it
remember
makes
from
up that
here,
wall of
it
the-
makes up that entire
Okay.
section. But no, it's nowhere near as big as the thalamus. The thalamus is enormous.
Okay.
So, well, relatively speaking.